Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. It's a better turnout than I actually thought, which is good. Sorry, I forgot your name. Right, I mentioned I'm Gary Jackson from Elite Consulting. I've been working with SAP in the technical area for about 28 years now. And yet again, we've got another change in how we work. We've got BTP in the picture now. So I'm just going to talk to you about a customer success story of how one of our clients has utilized BTP to modernize their sort of user experience prior to actually moving to S4. So how can we innovate without actually being forced, if you like, to move to S4? That's just a little bit about us. So we're a professional services company. We've been operating for about 10 years. I won't go labour on that too much because it's all about the customer story today. So our customer that we're going to give the story about today is Capita PLC. I don't know if you know, is a UK-based provider, business outsourcing provider. So they have a lot of large government contracts. They've been operating SAP for, 18 plus years. And from the outset, they've been operating a very sort of heavily customized enterprise portal. And I'll explain a little bit more about that on the next slide. And to remove the need for operating this portal, they decided to re-engineer a lot of their processes in SAP BTP. And again, some of the reasons will become clearer in the following slides. So what was their challenge? Unsupported software. They've been operating, as I say, this portal on Enterprise 702, which has been out of support since the end of 2017. It's been heavily customized, and by that I mean not so much the configuration, but a lot of the developments inside it were written in old technologies, which are now old technologies. They weren't back then, but it has been written in technologies that make it difficult for them to upgrade the portal to, say, NetWeaver 750. Some of those technologies, they don't work. And the browser compatibility is also quite an issue for them. As I mentioned, they're heavily customized, so 90% of the developments inside the portal were built on old technologies such as Dojo, and I think we've got remaining stuff was written on WebDim Pro, Java, and ABAP, which are no longer supported. They didn't actually use any enterprise portal business packages, so it's completely bespoke. The only thing that they used here was the NetWeaver stack to operate this on. So as you can see, it's getting to what it's already unsupported, but even its successor 750 is going out of support. So part of the challenge then was, we don't want to spend money on re-engineering this aging portal. What can we do? Scalability was becoming an issue. So custom applications are not really easily scalable compared to SAP standard. And that's quite a key one. A lot of the bespoke developments were written by, let's say, highly experienced developers that the customer didn't have in their own team. And those sort of skills also were not readily available on the SAP marketplace because they were really not SAP-specific development tools or development languages. And therefore, maintaining these applications became a bit of a bind, really, relying on certain people. And we've all heard the skills gap within the SAP world, as a lot of the people maybe back in the 90s that were developing these applications are now approaching retirement, like my good self. And of course, security risk. Security is a massive topic area at the moment. Custom applications, maybe that were written 20 years ago, maybe weren't written with security in mind, but it is obviously a big player in the world of IT right now. So that was their challenge. That was the architecture, and I think the key thing to notice here or to highlight here is the existing platform or applications. They couldn't support tablets, they couldn't support mobile smartphones, which, as we all know, is a big part of everyday life. So if you can't use a customer application on a modern device, it's a bit limiting. And as I say, the portal 702 currently out of support. The ECC EHP6 backend, of course, we know is still in support until end of 27 at the moment, or 2030 if you want to pay extra. But that was their current architecture. Now on to maybe the more interesting part, the approach and the solution that they went for. You might be familiar with some of these little BTP icons, which are probably going to become the norm over the next few years. Key points to note here, we've now got support for tablets and smartphones. And everything that's inside the BTP platform is SAP out of the box, so to speak. They've got a SAP standard entry point for users. And then tapping into things like SAP's identity services, and it's integrated with the corporate IDP, I believe, or IDM, which is fed by the corporate IDP. Obviously there's a tunnel into the cloud connector to connect for the on-premise systems to connect up to the BTP sub-accounts that are in question here. So that's the architecture. What they've decided to use is the ABAP environment. So an ABAP instance in the cloud, or side-by-side extensibility, more or less the terms go hand in hand. And effectively, we're spinning up an ABAP stack in the cloud, and it operates, although you can't see this, it's basically operating like a normal NetWeaver AS with a few limitations. The ABAP syntax is not as broad as what we've got on the on-premise version, but it is similar. Part of the strategy, or the message we get from SAP now, is we need to keep the core clean. And this, for me, this is nothing new. So when we started in the 90s, we were encouraged not to change the core system, not to develop too much. But it wasn't as strict then. So companies globally would be creating many Z programs, many exits and many tables, etc., to extend the functionality of R3 as it was back then. There's now a push for a clean core, and I strongly believe this is for one reason in particular is SAP's push for moving to RISE. I don't know if any of you have worked on a RISE program or a project and gone through an upgrade. It's still as painful as it is when you're doing it yourself. So even though SAP are clicking the buttons in the sum process, the actual collaboration that you need to have with SAP remains as it is now. If you're in the basis space, you might need to sort out problems during the process, generation problems with objects that won't generate on the new version. Hence, if we can clean that core and have very little generation problem, it makes the upgrade in RISE a lot more straightforward for SAP and for you as the consumer of RISE. So that's, as a basis person, I think that's probably the most important thing from my perspective. I think there are other reasons that they want to keep the core clean as well. Encouraging people to use the BTP services. You therefore consume BTP credits and you're spending money with SAP. So it's an ideal world. It's a great idea. And I think we should all maybe strive for it eventually, but if you've got a monolithic ECC system, it's quite difficult to get to a clean core now. So one of the things that came out of this project was we can clean the core just by the fact that we're going to re-engineer in an ABAP instance around the core, so that when we do move to S4, all of those objects that we've developed in the ABAP instance in the cloud will still work when we move to S4. There might be some tweaks and remediation that needs to happen because we're moving from ECC to S4, but effectively those developments should still work. And that was one of the key factors for Capita. We don't want to invest in upgrading to NetWeaver 750, do some remediation because those technologies that we were using are not supported. We need to switch to some newer technologies. But we've only got 3 years life then. We need to do it all again. So let's invest in BTP now, spin up the ABAP instance, clean the core at the same time, use some in-house skills that we have in our ABAP team, because it's the same language with some syntactical restrictions, if you like. But for anybody who's got the ABAP skills, they should be able to use that knowledge in the ABAP instance in the cloud. That's effectively the big win actually here is, there's quite a few wins. Clean the core, retain your skills, getting ready for S4, not reinventing the wheel again and having to spend the money. So there's quite a few wins here on this project. Just a little bit about the BTP ABAP environment. Of course, you can go away and look at the excellent SAP help pages around all of the BTP stuff. It is actually good compared to what it has been in the past. So it's a PaaS, it's a platform as a service, and it basically allows you to develop standalone apps. You don't need S4, or ECC. You can develop standalone apps, or you can connect it to a back-end SAP system, as we've done in this project. You can read that for yourself if you like. There's quite a few points there, but there's a HANA database included as part of that, where you can persist, like you can persist in a normal ABAP NetWeaver system. I think I've gone through all that in the few minutes beforehand, but those are the reasons it was chosen. Obviously, keep the core clean, or try and clean the core. I quite prefer the words keep the core lean, because maybe it's not possible to have it completely clean. I'd like to see somebody who has got a completely clean core somewhere out there. A
new customer?
Say again?
A new customer of SAP?
That's it. Thank you. I knew there was an answer. Until they decide that there's no standard functionality and they have to go and start. But we should encourage them then to develop outside the core, shouldn't we? To consume the newest technology features and stay in line with best practices. There are quite a few regular updates which, if you're not careful, can catch you out. I've got my esteemed colleague here, Jana, who was the technical lead on this project, so if some of these terms I don't quite get right, I can look there for some technical support. There you go. These two circles here with our logo in there, basically showing that because it was ECC, we had to develop a framework to allow this, let's say, this connectivity, or the connectivity between the ABAP instance and the back end needed some framework. Once that framework had been developed, the whole process of moving the existing applications from the portal into the ABAP instance was more efficient. So it was developing a framework which all the other applications could use to get to the back end. Once you move to S4, that framework is then replaced by SAP standard framework, and the applications should seamlessly then connect through the SAP framework to S4. So because it was connecting to ECC at the back end, this framework had to be developed. As I say, when they move to S4, that framework becomes redundant because it's replaced by the SAP standard. Is it safe to say that it was probably about an 80-20 rule? Once you'd done the 80% of the framework, the speed to develop the applications that were using that framework.
Yeah. I think the framework took about 9 months, but once that was developed, everything else, you could, for example, expose a table as a no data entity within half an hour, a developer, and you can have a value hop off that within 30 minutes from starting your SQL select to actually exposing it into a service definition, which you then can expose by Furia. Yeah,
so it's a case of getting that core functionality working, and then any specs that came forward to the team would be fast-tracked, or the turnaround was quick. Security is probably something that everybody who embarks on the BTP journey should probably do at the beginning. Whatever your strategy is in terms of your corporate IDP, whether you're using IDM, Azure AD, or whatever else, or you just want to use IIS out of the box, think you need to get that strategy correct in the first instance, because it will drive how users get onto your systems. You might already have some of the cloud products out there. I think we're speaking to the ladies from Babcock. They've got Success Factors, which is tapping into BTP security services. So one of the first things when you set up BTP and you've got your architecture, your account strategy, is look at the security, because it'll be used by anything that's basically deployed on BTP. I think at Capita they used IDM.
Yeah. So we used IDM to provision access privileges onto. So if, for example, a user wanted to get access to, say, purchasing role, then they would basically, they want to get access to a purchasing role, then what they would have custom Fury applications running in IDM where you can ask for access, it gets approved. Then IDM will actually roll out PFCG access, so your roles in Azure 1 in the ECC. Will also roll out access into your ABAP instance in the cloud, your business roles. And it will also provision IAS group access, IAS group access. And then you've got all three different accesses, and then obviously the IAS to role collection mapping in BTP will then give you access to the stuff that you need in BTP. And IDM provisioned all those sort of accesses through one common place.
I mean, security is specific to the client, how they're operating it. This is one use case, but typically connecting up to something like Azure AD would be pretty standard for a lot of companies, I think, when you're building your BTP platform. That's just reiterating the fact that this it's scalable now because of the framework. The applications can be deployed quickly. There's also an element of HA and DR built into BTP if you want it. Obviously, it'll cost, but it is scalable maybe more than or quicker than it is to scale on premise. If you need to start acquiring new servers, for example. One of the things that was instilled or obvious from the outset was to try to, once the framework had been done, was to try to, because there were so many processes in the portal, take a process, convert it into the ABAP instance and get it deployed and live. So you've got this sort of agile approach. Don't wait until you've got the whole thing built before you go live. I quite like that quote. I didn't know that Mark Twain had said that, but just start off with a few processes and just keep building, continuous improvement, continuous development. Just keep trying and putting stuff live, and then but eventually you'll have the whole thing done. But it's a matter of not waiting for the end goal, if you like. And I think that's also what SAP are doing with the BTP platform. Making changes. I mean, you've experienced things being rolled out that you weren't aware of. Well, there is a roadmap, and the roadmap's probably quite long. But they're not waiting until they've got the final product. They're putting it out there and getting people, encouraging people to use it and consume credits. So they're not waiting for the final product. I don't think, we're going to be in a position where we shouldn't be waiting for the final product. We have to get out there and start using it because it's not going away, and it's going to be here with us for, 20, 30 years maybe, plus. So some of the other things that you can use around the outskirts of a BTP, Cloud ALM is becoming quite prevalent in the SAP marketing. They're doing a lot of marketing around Cloud ALM. You should all have a license for Cloud ALM. It's free, up to 8 gigabytes of memory. If you've got an enterprise license, you'll have Cloud ALM. You can go into SAP for me and deploy it. It's quite straightforward. Then it's a matter of how do you use it. So it's available for implementation services and monitoring, or operations, if you like. So typically, you might want to set up Cloud ALM to monitor your BTP services. I think there's an alerting mechanism in there, via the notification service, and there's Cloud Transport Management, which eventually might become interesting. So if you've got a BTP landscape with a dev, QA, and production account, you're going to want to have some sort of similar sort of transport mechanism or management of your developments as you do in your traditional ABAP system. So transport management in the cloud is available. Cloud LM for monitoring, although it is a bit restrictive in terms of you can't monitor systems that are not running on HANA. You've got to look at something like Focused Run at that point, which is the successor to Solution Manager, because we're losing Solution Manager soon. I tried to summarise the points at the end there, which we've talked about. 15 apps, that's probably increased now. There's a lot more gone live in the last few weeks, but basically covering most of the sort of business areas that were in the enterprise portal. I think the key point here is that most of it's been developed with reuse in mind. Reuse as in the components that it's developed on, but also thinking about the move to S4, making sure that everything that's been developed and the cost involved in developing this is future-proof, basically. Existing developers were trained to support and manage the new apps, mainly because of the ABAP skill set. We just talked about the CI/CD process in terms of transports, etc. And some of the key things for users was that they don't need to have VPN access. Capita has 20,000 plus employees. Most of them were using the portal for HR-related things, timesheets, for example. They didn't need to really have a VPN connection, so they can do a lot of this now just obviously with an internet connection. We can now service mobiles and tablets, and we've got a 21st century future-proof UI consistency across application platforms. So one customer success story, which we were part of, which I think has been really interesting for the team to work on. So if you want any more questions now, we can go through it. I know we've got about 5 minutes left, or you can come and have a chat with us at the end at the stand. Thank you for listening anyway. Thank you.